and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we'll be trying to prevent a superpowered alien invasion and live a normal team life in Invincible Season 2. And then we'll be fighting our way through the henchmen of some corrupt Indian businessmen in Monkey Man. But before all of that, Nick, do you have anything to recommend to our listeners?
Well, I've been reading a comic, as I often do, and in fact, after doing Ultimate Spider-Man last episode, I've gone back and read yet another Marvel superhero comic, which I actually haven't done in a while, read large quantities of those. But yeah, I went back and read the Daredevil run by Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto. Obviously, another big connection with Ultimate Spider-Man there is that Marco Cicchetto also drew that. This is, I think, probably the comic where he went from being a sort of one of Marvel's many superhero artists who was well known for being sort of competent but not really getting much attention to someone who people recognised as, having something special and getting put on like high profile projects. This is, I guess, his breakout gig. So yeah, this was the Daredevil run by Chip Zdarsky, which started, I think it must be about 4 or 5 years ago now. This is very much me coming to it on the app, the Marvel Unlimited app, after it's finished, in which Matt Murdock starts to wonder if all this violence and beating people up is really making much difference in the world, which sort of comes to a head when he thinks he might have accidentally killed someone during a sort of routine Daredevil stopping a mugging event. And the consequences from that sort of spiral out through his life as he starts to question the whole ethos of what he's doing. And meanwhile, the Kingpin goes through... Well, the Kingpin has at this point become the mayor of New York in the comics. A storyline which, based on the after-credits scene of Echo, it looks like they're going to do in the Daredevil TV show. And yeah, the Kingpin has decided that having become the mayor, he wants to try and parlay this into something more legit. So he's started trying to really get in with the billionaires, the real big money power people, only to discover that they kind of see the Kingpin as a bit of a cheap, tacky, low-rent thug. So yeah, there's a bit of sort of characters shifting and changing and questioning their long-held patterns in this, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, definitely lots of material they could use in future MCU TV shows. Have we done a comic by this duo? It seems like we've reviewed something by theirs, but I'm trying to remember what it is.
We've done, as I said, Cicchetto drew Ultimate Spider-Man, which we covered last episode. Don't think we've done anything by Chip Zdarsky, although I might be wrong. He does. I feel maybe we have, but I can't remember what it is.
There's a possibility you've done it in your recommendations section at the beginning.
He did work on a comic called Sex Criminals, which I may very well have recommended at some point.
Yes, I think you did discuss that. Yeah, that's probably where I'm remembering it from.
Yeah, if you haven't read Sex Criminals, I believe they've just released a massive, chunky, paperback of the entire series, and that's a very good comic.
Cool, yeah, definitely going to just go and type Sex Criminals straight into Amazon.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah. But no, this sounds really good. Yeah, like a lot of material there. I like the idea of Daredevil questioning the difference he's making. Yeah, and I guess trying to search for some other way to make a difference in the world, other than beating people up.
Well, yeah, at this point in the story, he's sort of become a parole officer rather than a lawyer in a quest to, I guess, help people more directly. And yeah, I've only, cards on the table, I'm only about a third of the way through this run, which was like 50, 60 issues, and I've read about 20 of them. But yeah, it looks like he's going to end up maybe, I don't know, vacillating from either should I give up being Daredevil entirely or should I do something more dramatic than just, beating up individuals over the course of this run. So I'm interested to see how far it goes with this.
Yeah. Sounds good. So this is a completed run, and as far as you're aware, the story does build to like a climax.
Yeah, I think so. I think the next writer has now started on it, so it sounds like people are happy with how Chip Zdarsky wrapped up his storyline. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. I think Daredevil, I've seen actually a couple of think pieces on this recently, including a very good one on the website Sketched, if you're looking for comic journalism recommendations. That's Sketched with both the E's taken out. Yeah, about how Daredevil has an unusually high quality level for an ongoing superhero series. Like, the odds of a Daredevil run being good seem substantially higher. It seems to be a book that really brings the best out of its writers. There's really a certain pressure to do really well on it, because the character is largely left alone, so you don't tend to get dragged into crossovers. And yeah, I don't know, there's a certain sort of literary introspection to that character which people seem to really get drawn to and get compelled to really actually think about. And there's something really, I don't know, just good and thoughtful about the storytelling in this series. Like, it's very good premium telly, I guess. It feels very sort of character-driven drama. A lot of superhero comics can be quite sort of plot. But in this one, it is just the characters doing things and the logical consequences leading to a story, which is, how the really good stories do it.
Yeah, it does sound like there's a lot of scope in this for character development and, personal and interpersonal conflict. Yeah, especially personal conflict as people wrestle with who they are and what their role in the world is. I mean, there's quite a lot of different facets to Daredevil, I guess, which gives writers lots of things to explore. There's obviously he's got a secret superhero identity. They've got the fact that he's blind and has these like enhanced senses as a lawyer, when obviously there's all sorts of things to do with the legal profession. He's a lawyer trying to do some good in the world. He's got the sort of Catholic side to him as well. You can weave with any aspect of kind of New York life where he's based. So yeah, things like, again, plot lines involving politics, rich people, the sort of things we discussed so far in this segment. So I can see why there's a lot you can do with the character.
Yes, also the classic Daredevil storyline of him making terrible decisions in his love life. Predictably, by about 7 or 8 issues in, Daredevil has once again made his life more complicated by jumping into bed with an ill-advised person. He does do that a lot, Matt Murdock. Not as straightforwardly monogamous as many superheroes.
No, I guess he's kind of in the character, I suppose. He's a sort of bit of a handsome rogue, as well as being a sort of, a do-gooder lawyer and a superhero. So yeah, again, many aspects of the character.
Yeah, there's something very interesting about this sort of, I don't know, duality of him. I think people expect him to be quite buttoned up and saintly. Again, I guess in a slightly Catholic way because of his sort of blind lawyer status and because he's also this superhero. So I think he sort of delights a little bit in letting his hair down and blowing off steam and doing occasionally stupid things.
Yeah. This sounds like, a good run. I mean, are there other sort of well-established Daredevil characters in it? Foggy and co?
Foggy is in it. Karen, I don't think this is a big spoiler at this point to say, has been dead in Daredevil since the very late 90s, I think, or the early 2000s, and has so far not been brought back, which is actually unusual for a classic Stan Lee character at Marvel. Normally, they've been somehow stupidly resurrected by now. Elektra has just turned up, so it looks like she's going to play a fairly big part going forward. No sign of Bullseye yet. I don't know if they're going to use Bullseye, but yeah, a fair few classic Daredevil elements. Oh, and the Owl. Not a character who's been adapted yet, but the slightly savage, scary crime lord, the Owl, has also appeared.
Okay, cool. So yeah, drawing on the established lore of the character as well.
Yeah, it's very focused on recontextualising the existing elements, I think. He hasn't, so far, introduced any massively flamboyant new characters. There's a new cop character who has been especially inspired by Daredevil possibly accidentally killing this guy to try and bring Daredevil down, and there's a new crime family to cause a bit of a ruckus, just as the Kingpin is trying to go legit, but there's not any massive major showy new elements so far. But obviously we'll see where we go. I'm only a third of the way in.
Yeah, it does sound very good. And yeah, you say this has been well received, so it's something to add to people's to-read list.
Yeah, this has been massively critically well received. I think it's probably gone on into somewhere in a lot of people's top 5 Daredevil runs, and there's some big runs in there, including the Frank Miller run from the 80s, which I think is somewhat credited, along with Alan Moore, for starting the grim and gritty comics revolution.
Yes, we discussed that on the podcast, didn't we?
We discussed the sort of Born Again, yeah. We discussed the sort of 4-issue story he did towards the end of the run. But there is a whole other, I think 25 issues he did before that, which really put him on the map. But yeah, that is one of his big Daredevil stories, Born Again.
Which they're adapting for this new series, which is called Daredevil Born Again. Comes out at some point. They
kind of adapted it for season 3 of the last one, didn't they? That was pretty Born Again.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do with this, but maybe it's just the title, but it is called... I guess maybe the title alludes to the fact that he's born again on a new streaming service, no longer Netflix, a la Spider-Man Homecoming.
I suspect it is more, a knowing title about the fact that Daredevil is coming back after a long time away, and to sort of quietly ignore the fact they've already done the story. They'll probably find some way. There are a few elements of the original Born Again they didn't do in the last series, like him fighting a massive super soldier with Thor and Captain America. Maybe they'll do that.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, I guess it's a good time for people to start reading classic Daredevil runs in preparation for more Daredevil coming some point to the TV. I think it might be next year.
Yeah, but I think, to be honest, I mostly read it because I read Ultimate Spider-Man and liked Chichetto's art and was reminded that I've wanted to check this out for ages. And it's gorgeous here as well, by the way. Chichetto's art may be a bit grittier and dirtier and slightly less smooth and polished on Daredevil than it was on Ultimate Spider-Man, which does fit the character because he's doing some street fighting. But yeah, it's all good. It's all very good. Some gorgeous work.
Yeah, we both really liked the art when we reviewed Ultimate Spider-Man, the last issue. I thought, just really great way of bringing characters to life in that comic.
Yeah, as I said last time, in Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man, there's a lot of adult drama and nuanced emotions, and bringing along the subtlety of conversations. And in Daredevil, as I say, it's got a sort of adult drama vibe, and again, he's nailing it. So yeah, this is very good. If you haven't read it in response to all the other rave reviews, then why not read it in response to this one? Alistair, what have you been consuming?
Well, we were just discussing Daredevil's return to Disney Plus. So I've been watching a Disney Plus show that had a big advertising campaign around it when it came out, but doesn't seem to have had a huge impression in the culture, but which is a shame because it's a good show. So I've been watching Culprits, which is a heist drama that's on Disney Plus in the UK. It's about a heist that sort of goes wrong, and you kind of get two plot lines. One is the kind of the before plot line, the build up, and then the execution of the heist. And then the other plot line is several years afterwards when the consequences start to kick in, especially as this bizarre masked assassin is tracking down the people who did the heist and killing them off. It's a good show. It's got a lot of tension in it, quite a few twists. It's a British and American co-production. So yeah, with some high-profile British stars and some Americans in it as well. Yeah, the before plot line is set in Britain and ends with a big robbery in London, and then the after plot line is set in America, so that's how they handle the co-production side. But yeah, I'm surprised that more people aren't talking about this because it is very good.
Yeah, this, I think, to be honest, if not for the fact that I think you mentioned it to me at some points during one of our exciting non-podcast conversations, I think this would have passed me by entirely, to be honest. I vaguely know it exists. I think it may have gone past me on a Disney Plus recommendation page algorithm thing once, but no, this has not made a huge impression on me. Or on my Twitter discourse feed thing.
Yeah, I guess so. It goes to show you can spend a lot of money in advertising, and maybe people just won't respond to it. But yeah, it's got some high-profile people in it. Gemma Arterton plays the mastermind behind the heist. Eddie Izzard is in it as well as one of the villains. So yeah, it's got a real sense of style I like as well about it. Like they really seem to put a lot of thought into the production design and the sort of visual aesthetic. There's something about it that's sort of slightly lurid colours that this masked murderer who's chasing them down wears, and the sort of each scene seems to have a very sort of distinct colour palette and things like that. And the costuming is very well done. I think they've really thought about what this show looks like and how it's going to be presented visually, which I really liked.
Okay, so it's not just a meat and potatoes sort of gritty BBC heist drama.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a bit of panache to it. There's a bit of a sort of acknowledgement that this isn't, it's not super realistic. It's not kind of aimed at Luther-style gritty realism where everyone wears grey and everything's sort of slightly drab, which I quite like about it, yeah. It never misses an opportunity to spin some extra drama out of a scene. So yeah, there's a bit in the first episode when the main character has to move the stash of his money because he's buried it in a forest that's about to be chopped down and dug up for a new housing estate to be built. And there's this whole extended scene of him trying to move the money, then getting involved in a hit and run, then the money ending up hiding it in a dumpster, then the dumpster gets taken and he has to get inside a dumpster one of the garbage van to get it back. And it's just this whole kind of extended thing of and another thing and another thing, and that's just kind of sort of setting up the first episode, and it is very, very tense. So they never really pass an opportunity to find some way to squeeze some extra tension out of a scene.
Well, I guess that's what you want with your edge of seat crime thriller, isn't it? You want to be constantly on the edge of your seat. With the constant fear that someone's going to get caught or murdered.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I recommend diving into this. They've done one season of it. It's got a conclusive ending. I get the feeling this was conceived to be like a one-season project. I assume had it been wildly successful, maybe they do more of it, a la Luther, which I don't know, probably seemed like it was conceived to be a one-season run telling one story and has now expanded into 6 seasons.
Transmedia empire,
yeah.
Yeah, I was curious whether this had a conclusive ending, given that it doesn't seem to have made the biggest cultural splash in the world, so I don't know if that second season is likely. But it's good to know that if I do decide to watch it, there is at least an ending.
Yes, there's definitely an ending. It doesn't end on a really annoying cliffhanger that's never picked up or anything like that. They could do more, I suppose, but yeah, it does feel like they've got this story to tell, and they tell it in 8 episodes. So yeah, don't let that put you off.
Maybe I'll give it a go. It does sound good. I haven't watched a good crime show in at least a few minutes.
Yeah. It's only worth watching if you want something that's kind of entertaining, tense, things like that. It's good sort of Saturday night TV. So yeah, I just wanted to give it a shout out here because I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. But I guess there's so much TV out there that some things fall through the cracks, even if they get big tube advertising campaigns.
Yeah, okay. I think the lesson we've learned here is that I don't pay much attention to the world around me. Okay, and now, straight on to Season 2 of Invincible. This is, of course, the animated superhero series on Amazon Prime, adapted from the comic by Robert Kirkman, Corey Walker and Ryan Otley. This is the story of Mark Grayson, a teenager who, in the first season, was anxious to get superpowers which he knew were coming for him, so he could follow in the footsteps of his father, the legendary superhero Omni-Man. But by the end of the first season, Mark had discovered that his father was actually an agent of an alien race called the Viltrumites, and had actually been sent there as a sleeper agent to eventually enslave the planet. And at the very climax of the season, he and his father had engaged in a bloody battle that had killed hundreds, if not thousands of people, and his father had very nearly killed Invincible himself before having a change of heart at the last minute and flying away. And this season follows the characters who are still, to be honest, faintly traumatised by these events, especially Mark Grayson's mother. And yes, they soon discover that the consequences of this will continue to unfurl around them as Mark tries, without a huge amount of success, to live a normal life. His mother tries to get on with her life, and eventually, inevitably, more of Mark's father's decisions return to haunt him. We have seen this whole second season, which was released in 2 parts at the beginning of last year and in the last few weeks. Alistair, what did you think of it?
So this is quite a big show. It's got a huge universe. I think there might be like as many characters and sort of like plots to fill like a whole MCU. And yeah, it just sort of gets bigger and grander as in this season compared to the last one. There's alien worlds in this and a sort of galactic conflict, and there's kind of a lot of plot lines. But despite all of that, running through the middle of it is this kind of quite simple story, the one you just sort of described at the beginning, about a family, kind of going through this traumatic experience, and a kid, basically Mark, trying to live like a normal life. And it's a really like powerful story at the core that keeps all these complex moving parts grounded and keeps it all like moving, and you do feel really invested in Mark as just a teenage boy. There's various bits about him trying to have a girlfriend and go to college and things like that. It's not necessarily breaking new ground in that sense in terms of like superhero stories, but it is just really relatable and moving. The characters feel like real people and you get very invested in them. So yeah, at its core, it's got this great storyline. So what's not to like?
Yeah, no, I think what's interesting about this show is I think a lot of the real appeal of it is, even though in some ways it's even more like up there and silly in terms of the actual events than like a lot of MCU stuff, like because it's animated, they don't have, quite the same budgetary concerns, so they can have him just randomly go to alien planets for an episode every so often, or have any number of weird superhumans appear. And strange things do just happen. Interdimensional travel just pops out of nowhere and happens. And there's a lot of like really big upscale ideas here, but they're very, very like dead focused on the what is this actually like for a person, not necessarily in a ponderous, deconstructive, what would this be like in the real world way, but in a like, how would this feel if you were Mark Grayson? And even though it's animated, it somehow feels more grounded and realistic in how it really sits with the character's feelings rather than focusing on spectacle. Like one of the other things Invincible has, which I guess sets it apart from other superhero things, is a huge amount of blood. Like there's a lot of violence and consequences of violence. Like if you've ever wondered what it would really be like to be punched by someone with super strength, Invincible is much more interested in getting into that than a lot of superhero adaptations. And it could come across as gratuitous. Arguably, you could probably find some scenes where maybe it is a little gratuitous, but I think it works for the most part because of, again, this feeling of, okay, what would this actually feel like to be a person in the middle of this? And what sort of horrible things would you end up seeing, and how would it affect you? And that's the main level on which this succeeds.
Yeah. I mean, it's right from the first episode when there's that post-credits bit when Omni-Man just violently murders all the other sort of superheroes that have been built up at that point. And that kind of very much sets the tone to gore and violence. But I think, what makes it not gratuitous is that you've got these characters that are well developed and relatable, and there's kind of, there is, as you say, like there's consequences to the violence, and they kind of explore what it's like. It's not like loads and loads of goons just being like diced up and things like that. That has emotional effects on the main characters. I mean, one of the plot lines in this second season, there's many plot lines, involves a guy who's been blown up in the past and then like surgically and mechanically reconstructed, and he's kind of coming to terms with the effects of that. I think that that's an event that happens at the end of the first season. And it's given like several scenes throughout this second season just telling that guy's story. And it's just sort of like quietly moving. They're like, yeah, what does happen to these people after they get, blown up in the course of, a superhero action scene. It's very much the opposite of the end of Man of Steel when they just trash a city and it doesn't really matter. So yeah, that's what I think kind of keeps it from being gratuitous.
Yeah, and as you say, the size of the world is also very appealing to me, and it feels, again, it's not really trying to feel realistic, but it feels interesting. It feels like there's more going on. It feels like the lead character doesn't just exist in a vacuum. I don't know, it's a weird one, but I think in the first time we covered this, I think I may have compared it to Game of Thrones, which may possibly have been me reviewing at the height of COVID mania. But it does have that sense of a wider universe where things matter and ripple outwards, and you actually do find yourself surprisingly caring about a large spectrum of characters. Maybe I'm doubling down on this, who knows?
I don't know, I think the Game of Thrones comparison is apt in that it's got, I say, a lot of plot lines happening in different places and a lot of characters that people really like and engage with. I mean, that's what people liked about Game of Thrones. They got very invested in the characters and the houses and their struggle. We forget that was like the appeal. And this has, this is a similar thing. And it's not just like, the plot line involving, the main character, obviously Mark, and his struggle, with his, his father and things like that is very, very real. But, for example, there's another superhero who's introduced called the Immortal. Yeah, he's got superpowers, he's immortal, kind of does what it says on the tin. And he's kind of about, like a third tier character. He's not like, in Mark's immediate family or like people directly interacting with like the main plot line, but this third tier character has like a complete character story arc that's just done in the background, and it contributes to the main arc. And this, like, he gets more development than some secondary or primary characters even in a lot of shows, and it's just very deftly done with like a few key scenes and a few moving bits. And that's the kind of, I guess, the height of the writing that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, but in some ways it is soap opera, but it's extremely well done soap opera, and crucially it's very logical. As I say, things ripple into other things and things roll into each other in a way that doesn't feel brutal and forced all the time. So yeah, I still really enjoyed this a lot. There's also a bit more work with the Atom Eve character this year, who gets some more important bits this season and gets her own special episode, which was released between the first two seasons, and which I watched. Basically, I waited till the second season came out and watched it before. And yeah, I think she's going to become increasingly important in the show going forward. And yes, it was good to finally get some background on her. That one was well done as well.
Yeah, that was a nice little like bonus treat as well. Yeah, again, like that sort of signature, like really building up characters and adding complexity to them. It kind of went through her whole life. So yeah, which I guess really does help you build up a character when you see them from like childhood onwards. Yeah, I mean, there's like huge worlds to this. There's alien planets. There's a whole, like, I think 2-episode plot line when Invincible goes to the planet of the sort of ant people, which is a whole other plot line that like happens. And then like the thing about this is we're given the kind of the outline of each character in each of these kind of civilizations or situations. There's another plot line involving aliens from Mars, like invading.
Yeah, which sort of picks up a storyline from the previous season, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's various other plot lines and stuff that are picked up. There's there's a running plot line with these two supervillains who are clones of each other, and they don't know which one's the original. There's a plot line involving some lizard people who live underground. Again, as I said, there's a whole kind of comic book franchise worth of material and characters for this, and each one we're given enough detail to understand what their deal is and who they are. So it kind of like sketches out like a whole civilization, how it works. And it feels detailed enough to be real, but also it kind of builds on what you know as fans of science fiction and superheroes. We're kind of like, here's a guy, this is his deal. You can kind of like flesh it in because like you're familiar with the idea of a world full of superheroes. But also there's enough detail in the sketch that it feels realistic.
Well, yeah, they're there to, not in a fake or constructed way, but they're there to play their role in the story. It never feels like they're, being set up for spin-offs or anything. The good thing about Invincible is it's quite laser focused on telling a straight story about Mark Grayson and the people in his orbit, and how he affects the wider world, and other people sort of exist to serve that story, which may be one reason why this feels, even though we've watched at this point 1,000 hours of superhero content in the last decade, why this feels fresh and straightforward, because it genuinely is incredibly story orientated in a way that a lot of the others aren't. Like it's not trying to spin things off. It's not changing stories and making shit up on the fly, or just having things randomly disappear between movies because they've decided they don't want to spend money on that, or because that actor's decided they can't be asked, or whatever. There is something weirdly new and refreshing about the fact that it's a superhero story which is made to the same high standard as a lot of the best MCU stuff, but doesn't at all have to reckon with reality or financial concerns, apart from the need, I guess, for people to keep watching it so it can keep getting renewed. It just, continues and seems very focused on just telling its story.
Yeah. Like I say, it links, everything links back to Mark and his story. Like the 2-part story of him on the planet of the kind of the ant people is there because it builds to him having a breakthrough about his relationship with his father, and there's and it moves that plot line on towards the end of it. That contributes to the family's healing process from the last season. It moves on the plot line with the alien invasion when the Viltrumites try to invade the ant planet. So even though you've got this whole 2-parter about the ant planet, it's all there to drive forwards the main plot line. And this is the Mark Grayson show. It's all about him. Like, there's no thought or conception anyway that we're going to get like a TV show about the Immortal. It just wouldn't work because he's just a background character. But he's got enough story to feel like a real person, but it's just ultimately there driving towards Mark's story, which is what it always comes back to.
But yeah, I mean, that's the way people describe a lot of like the classic Marvel superheroes. That's what people say about the difference between people like Spider-Man and Iron Man and Superman and Batman, in that it's always about the person at the end of the day. The Spider-Man stories are actually Peter Parker stories, and in some ways this is the classic Peter Parker model. A sort of relatable teenager becomes a superhero. Oh no, what will he do? But crucially, they've very, very heavily changed the kind of superheroics he's involved with and the tone of the stories in order to make this not just Spider-Man with the serial numbers filed off. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of elements of that, which, as a big Spider-Man fan, is certainly not hurting for me.
I mean, as I said before, like some of the stuff it's not doing isn't exactly breaking new grounds. I mean, the fact that like some of these plot lines are familiar, such as like trying to live a normal life and be a superhero. There's like, he has a girlfriend and then a villain turns up and threatens his girlfriend at one point. His family gets threatened. It's all stuff we've seen in Superman movies or, things like anything involving like a powered superhero. I mean, partly this show works because it's similar to things we've seen in the past, allows it to kind of go like, here's the king of the fish people, and you know that like what his deal is straight away because it's building on stuff before. But there is something that does feel fresh and original about this. Yeah, as you say, it's not just, Spider-Man or Superman with the serial numbers filed off. It is doing something fresh and original, and I guess it goes to show that like, it's that thing we say that like, there are no original ideas, there's only original execution. And I just think it's just this specific story that we really get invested in Mark and his family, and that's what makes it good. Just as, there's been a gajillion, epic fantasy shows before Game of Thrones and more of them afterwards, obviously. Like, I've been watching Wheel of Time, and what it doesn't have that Game of Thrones had is it didn't have, Tyrion, the Stark kids, and those people, Jon Snow, whatever, those people actually got invested in. And that's what sets it apart from similar things that exist. That's what gives it its original execution, if not original concept.
Yeah, and I think it's what it's doing. I mean, to be honest, what it's doing is what a lot of good superhero comics have done. Like, to be honest, if someone says to me, okay, Nick, this very niche question, but I've made up to serve the answer I want to give. Nick, what superhero adaptation best gives the impression of, like, a good ongoing superhero comic? To be honest, at this point, I'd always say Invincible. I'd always say Invincible is possibly doing it best out of all the adaptations, of actually creating the impression of a good superhero comic rather than bending it around to make it into movies.
Yeah, not forced into a kind of Hollywood cinematic template. I mean, you said that this feels in some ways like a soap opera, and you've also said in the past that ongoing comics have a lot in common with soap operas. They have different plot lines, different characters, different stages in plot lines moving forwards, feeding into each other. This sense of there's always story, but they're not building towards like a climax like a movie is or even a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing that used to be talked about ages ago, which I'm probably going to misquote or paraphrase quite badly. Apologies. I think it was the system for making ongoing comics and keeping them moving by, I think, Paul Levitz, a DC writer from the past, where basically you have a very clear tier of like A plot, B plot, C plot, and D plots, where like the A plot gets most of the pages, the B plot gets 2 or 3 pages, the C plot gets like 1 page, the D plot gets like maybe a couple of panels or a few mentions, and you just have this constant ongoing conveyor belt of plots up the tiers. In an issue or two's time, the B plot moves up to A, the C plot moves up to B, the D plot moves up to C, and this process just continues as the series cycles on, and that's how you keep your ongoing comic going. Although I don't think Invincible's being made quite as like conveyor belty as that. There is something of that to it. It is like keeping things going just by having there always be story rolling and there always be more story in the background to come.
Yeah. And it's got a big enough world to facilitate that. There's always, more characters they can build out and things like that. Such as like the lizard people plot line. It was, I think when it was brought back, I think it might have been the first season. The only issue with this is that the first season came out in like 2021 at the height of lockdown, which was good and it was fresh and exciting at the time. But it's been a while for this second season, like 3 years. Hopefully we won't have to wait 3 years for the third season. But yeah, like the lizard people, like when they're brought back, I think they just get like one scene. And then, like, there's an episode when basically they have the entire climax when the lizard people plot comes to a head. And then, and then there's a very, very, very violent bit, even by their standards, with the lizard people. And then, then that kind of drives into the A-plot of basically Mark Grayson wasn't there when the lizard people attack. He feels bad because he can't be everywhere at once, but also he's the only person with the ability to save the world. So and that's kind of how it works. And that's just, like, one thing. I mean, like, if you ask most people about this show, like, what did you like about... Or what do you remember about Invincible Season 2? Will they even say, like, oh, yeah, that deal with, like, the lizard people? Like, it's like third tier, as they say, like, the immortal or the robot guy who's been rebuilt in, like, an explosion or things like that. But there's all sorts of other plot lines as well. There's, like, the plot line with Atom Eve, and there's the plot line with, was it Rudy and the superhero who gets younger when she transforms?
Monster Girl,
yeah. And there's, like, and all the other characters and stuff. And there was just a lot here. Then each episode feels... even though they're like 55 minutes, which is, again, the length of Game of Thrones, even shorter than some of the longer Game of Thrones episodes. But even with 55 minutes, it feels like they're cramming a lot. There was one point when I was saying, at one point, saw something like, oh yeah, that's referring back to the previous episode. And then I paused and went, wait a minute, no, that's referring back to earlier this episode. It just feels like longer ago. They get through so much.
It feels long, but in a good way.
I like long stories. I was about to say I like long things, but that's probably an innuendo too far.
Yeah, although if we're going to criticise, since you mentioned the release schedule, I didn't think releasing this in 2 parts was necessary. I felt like it just sort of hampered the momentum of it a bit.
Yeah, it would have been better in one.
That's just me. I would have preferred to have the whole season in one 8-week run rather than 2 4-week runs with a few months in the middle. That did not do much for me. If they do that again for season 3, I'm just saving the first run until they release the second.
Yeah. And I prefer that this came out more frequently. I know probably entitled consumers getting angry at their creatives. I'm sure this show takes a long time to write, animate, get all these details correct from story through to like execution. Releasing it the first bit during COVID probably didn't help. So I feel for the people behind it. But at the same time, I really enjoyed this. So I don't want to wait 3 seasons for the next bit. And it does. Even on like the first season, the end of this season didn't feel so much like an ending. The first season had a quite strong ending. Obviously didn't resolve things up, but it did feel like a complete unit. This gets to a point and sort of stops. There's some interesting twists at the end, definitely, but it's really much, at least setting up at least the third season, if not more.
Yeah, it does definitely feel a lot more like, a period in the life with clear, and then things continue. It doesn't have quite the same massive climax. I think I've seen quotes from the producers saying they really, really hope there will not be as long a gap this time, because I think it was renewed for season 2 and 3 at the same time. So hopefully season 3 will be maybe a mere 1, maybe 2 years away rather than the full 3. We'll see.
Yeah, we got plenty of time to catch up on this, and I strongly recommend it. Yeah, there's a good chance of this being in top of the year list. I think it made my top of the year list in 2021.
It was definitely somewhere in my top 10 in 2021, yeah.
Yeah. And it's got a great voice cast as well, actually. That's one point to say, huge people from... it's like Stephen Yuen is Mark, and Sandra Oh plays the mum, J.K. Simmons is the father, Omni-Man. And they've added even more guest voices for this season. Zachary Quinto plays the robot Ruti. There's Ree Shearhorn from we all loved in Better Call Saul, who plays the woman on the ant planet. Yeah, I think there's just too many names to mention.
Yeah, Calista Flockhart as Mark's brother's babysitter. Sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh God, so many. Yeah, I mean, it's just a great voice cast and stuff. Yeah. Good work.
Yeah. No, really, really enjoyed this. They successfully followed it. Good job, lads. I look forward to you trying again in a few years. Okay, and last up today, it's Monkey Man, a new film written by, directed by, produced by, and starring Dev Patel, in which the main character, the anonymous kid, played by, yes, Dev Patel, goes to work in a hotel where the people who are responsible for the death of his family are, and of course starts planning and executing a rollicking rampage of revenge. But on his way, he'll have to go into the underground pit fighting scene. He'll have to have the shit beaten out of him many, many, many times. And then he'll have to go and live with an underground community to recover and train. It's a whole action revenge epic. It's a film. It's new. We've seen it. Alistair, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought this is a great action movie. Definitely in the sort of like 90s vein of tough guy revenge films. Yeah, it's got a classic revenge plot line. Dev Patel wants to kill the people who displaced his family and killed his mum and ruined his life basically. And he's killing his way up the kind of hierarchy towards the big boss bad guy. Great action movie, really beautifully shot. I feel this film, I think Dev Patel wanted as his calling card to Hollywood that he can be an action star. But if anything, it's his calling card to Hollywood that he's a great director. He's got amazing visual style. It's beautiful to look at. Really brings the intensity of like Indian culture into the film and things like that. Yeah, it's good old 80s, 90s style action movie. Got like training montage and everything that you alluded to. It's not quite as horny as some of those movies were. But other than that, it's a very much old school action movie done for, I guess, the 21st century and, done Indian style. So, I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah, me too. I've seen a lot of comparisons to John Wick, but as ever, showing how out of touch I am with the cinema, I have not seen a single one of those major genre-changing blockbusters. But yeah, no, this was really good. Dev Patel, pretty great. As you say, he has done an action film before. He was the star in The Green Knight, in which he played with a similar level of, with the same sort of vibe of sort of intense, tired, and hairy. But in this, he's
definitely his style, intense, tired, and hairy.
Certainly in this end of his career, in these action films. But in this one, he's definitely taken it up a notch. He is definitely even more like furiously intense with this character. I mean, as I sort of said in the synopsis, the character is basically anonymous. The character is just called Kid. And Dev Patel basically just imbues the character with personality on sheer performance. Like, you don't get a huge amount of exposition beyond vague hints until a bit over halfway through. And before that, he's just this guy fighting against overwhelming odds. And he pulls it off through sheer charisma. Yes, Dev Patel is incredibly good at this. But you're right, the direction is amazing. It looks lovely. Yeah, maybe he will end up getting more directing jobs off this than acting jobs. I don't know. But he is also incredibly magnetic as the main character.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great showcase for Dev Patel, his acting skills. Yeah, as you say, he kind of gives all the life and personality to this character. Gives him this sort of simmering intensity as he smashes his way through huge numbers of goons to try and get these corrupt businessmen. And it's all done, I think, with this like complete lack of irony, which is one thing that makes it feel slightly fresh. Like, there's a few moments of humor and things like that when something slightly daft happens, but there's no sense of quips, irony. It's straight up doing the kind of revenge story. You're supposed to buy into this as something's literally happening, and there's no level of kind of artifice to it or postmodernism to it. So yeah, it's one, again, why it feels like a much older movie in that regard. And I guess it's part, as we were talking about 2 episodes ago with June, that there is this kind of desire for people not to have something that's kind of like ironic and full of like kind of mocking humor, that something is straight up doing a thing in a kind of sincere way, and that's what this film is doing.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of prepared for this to be like a tight as fuck movie, as we used to occasionally say on this podcast, which really just blasted through its premise. Like Dev Patel just swings in and starts killing dudes and doesn't really stop killing dudes till the end, apart from maybe a short break in the middle to have a training montage and a drink of water. But it isn't quite that, to be honest. It is actually a little bit slower, more thoughtful than that. It's like there's a lot of taking its time and building up the environment at the beginning. There's some pondering of these wider themes of religion and politics that Dev Patel clearly wants to touch on. And I thought that was interesting, because there is a much more straightforward version of this movie where it is just, okay, Dev's got to get to the top of the building. A load of people are going to have to die. Let's go. And it's not quite that straightforward.
Yeah, it's got slightly more to it than The Raid, which is, pretty much literally that plot line. It does, really feel like a film that has something to say about India. And it puts its message up there, like, boldly on the screen. Yeah, it doesn't do anything sort of subtly, this film. But yeah, it is a great film, I think, about modern India. It really goes into the corruption, especially with the, wealthy people, levels of poverty. The villain is sort of said that he's like exploiting workers. He's built some horrible factory on the land he took from Dev Patel's family and their community. Yeah, he's a sort of spiritual guru, so he's exploiting that to make money and get power, this villain. So yeah, there's a lot about the kind of corruption that plagues India. There's quite a bit about Hindu nationalism. I'd say this is more a film about the problems of corruption in India than Hindu nationalism explicitly. They don't really talk about like persecution of Muslims or things like that. That's a problem in India. But yeah, it does pretty much say the villain is a Hindu nationalist. He's in bed with populist, Indian politicians. There's this. It's all set around an election as well, and there's like the Sovereign Party that's supposed to be a sort of Hindu nationalist party that the villain is supporting. So it does point towards that as one of its themes it's exploring, and it's part of woven in how kind of Hindu nationalism and corruption is woven together in the same way that Trump's populism and his corruption are woven together. And there is also a bit, during his training montage, he stays with this Hindu sect who I'm not particularly familiar with, but they've got a sort of genderqueer or sort of transgender identity. The Hindu deity they follow is kind of part male and part female and things like that. And I think they're very much standing in for India's sort of repressed religious minorities and who live sort of quite different lives that are kind of repressed by this modern corrupt and Hindu nationalist society. So there is a lot of themes about contemporary India in there that this film is putting up front.
Yeah, I mean, I do not pretend to know enough about Indian politics to be able to pick up on all the nuance of Dev Patel's point. But yeah, there's definitely something being said here about, corrupt religious figures like the main villain here, who doesn't actually get that much screen time. It's not a scenery-chewing villain performance, but does always come across as, a certain level of aloof and creepy in a way that builds up nicely to the inevitable final confrontation with Dev Patel.
Yeah. And he's got his sort of main henchman, the kind of the second person in the killing hierarchy that Dev Patel's his way through is a corrupt chief of police who obviously has bodyguards and goons and is a tough guy. And there's two fight sequences with that guy that are quite good. There's an early bit when he tries at first to do a hit on the people on his revenge list and it goes wrong, and then there's the later bit when he gets his murder spree right. And those are some good intense action scenes with that villain. Again, it's how a lot of action movies in superheroes movies work. You've got the kind of the big boss brain villain who's the smart one pulling the strings, and he's got his heavy who's kind of the other guy that the main character slug it out with. So we're on familiar ground here, but it is very stylishly done, and with a sort of flavour of Indian corrupt politics to make it seem original.
Yes, and as you say, the action scenes are incredibly good and well choreographed. There's a nice sort of style of anything will do as a weapon. You'll see Dev Patel smack dudes around with basically anything that's to hand. And there's some particularly grim sequences in a lift. There's some good use of a serving tray at one point. There's a lot of the inevitable kitchen implements fight scene. That's always good.
Yeah, one guy gets burnt on a hob, which was particularly bad. Lots of knives, broken bottles, things like that, swords, all sorts of stuff. There's just one bit when just some random guy comes up with him with an axe.
Yeah, but Dev Patel is running through the city to get away from the people who are chasing him, and he just randomly stumbles into the man with axe for them, as you do.
Yeah, it's absolutely unhinged to the level of all the chases, all the people. Yeah, I mean, there must have been a huge cast and stuff, and very complicated execution of these fight sequences. It really gets across how busy and crowded India is. These sort of market scenes and club scenes and stuff, how many people there are, how densely packed it is. It weaves in what I think it's like in India. There's also quite a lot of child poverty in the film, which I know people say about one of the things they find very difficult when they visit India is the levels of child poverty. And the film does touch on that with the way that children are working for these crime gangs and level of poverty. So it kind of weaves in this Indianness into the action sequences, through a lot of densely packed rooms where there's a lot of fighting going on.
It definitely, it has a distinct feel, which is different from other action movies, which comes from its setting, and also because Dev Patel actually has something to say about Indian politics and the current state of India, it doesn't just feel like he's using it as, a bit of window dressing.
Yeah. No, it does feel, you're right. It has something to say. And Dev Patel's done films, set in India before, and I think what brought him to prominence partly was Slumdog Millionaire. But it feels like, there's a real observance of Indian culture steeped in that. It's not cultural appropriation anyway. This is a film about Indian culture. It's got a lot to say, especially some sharp criticisms about corruption and Hindu nationalism. But it's not the one dimension of that. Like I say, there are various, he's helped by a different group of Hindus. So it's not trying to make a point that Hinduism's bad. It's more that these people who are exploiting it to make money and exploit people they're the ones who are bad because they're also action movie villains who he's going to murder his way through.
Well, there's a lot of straightforward. I'm sure that person had maybe kids and a family, but Dev Patel has just put a saucepan through his face, so oh well. But, it's that sort of film. We're not thinking about that.
Yeah, it's in the 90s, action movie way, there's goons, he's murdering his way through them. Don't think about too hard about where all these people came from or what their deal is, a la the joke in Austin Powers. But it is, it's a great calling card to Hollywood of what what Dev Patel can do. He feels underserved. Allegedly, he's always wanted to be a big action star, but it's not getting the roles, so he's done fuck it, I'll do it myself. Write it, direct it, story it, star in it, do everything. So it's a fantastic showcase of his skills and abilities as both a director and an action star and an actor. So I really hope this does lead to more. There might even be a Monkey Man 2. I guess all these things are like a franchise, aren't they? From Expendables to John Wick.
I mean, this is kind of an uber spoiler, but the plot doesn't leave much room for it, does it?
No, but you never put it past these films to come up with a way to do more. I mean, they're doing a sequel to Gladiator. Come on. Very conclusive ending to that film.
Yeah. But I watched The Green Knights, which I did enjoy, but perhaps felt like a bit indulgence at times. But this very much just magnetic from beginning to end. Good film. He's cracked what he's doing here.
Yeah, The Green Knight's very much an A24 film. It's got their sort of visual style. It's got their sort of kind of unusual sort of tonal shifts and plotting and structure. This is, I think more of a straight up action movie, but it does have a lot of visual pizzazz and stuff to it. So it's similar to The Green Knight. They both had really strong visual style and a kind of real excellent use of cinema as a visual medium. This film is gorgeous to look at, as well as being very, very violent, much like Invincible. We've gone to town on the old ultra violence this week.
Yeah. The whole moderate fantasy violence part of our title might be a bit of a lie this time. Sorry to anyone who really does come to this podcast strictly for nice, clean, sensible, energy blast violence without too much blood. We've let you down.
Yeah, from the 12As to the... I think these are both 18s.
I don't know if Invincible is an 18. I mean, it is a comical amount of gory violence, but then again, it is a cartoon.
Yeah. Does that mean they get away with it? I think Monkey Man is
Monkey Man is an 18, yes. I checked that.
Which might mean one of the reasons why it's not maybe making the waves it is, in that it is, that kind of teenage boy, and probably in this case, teenage girls as well, who want popcorn cinema, I guess, are kind of restricted from seeing it. Although I think it'll be on Netflix or something like that, so you can fill your boots. Yeah,
I do hope that, if nothing else, when this goes on to streaming, it becomes a sort of cult action film, because it does deserve it.
Yeah, it deserves to get the same status as John Wick or The Raid or any of those movies that are just great roller coaster action movies.
So if this has had good reviews, this has had a good reception, so hopefully it'll get onto people's radar one way or another, but if you've somehow missed it, then check it out.
That's all we have time for this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice. And while you're there, leave us a review. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself.
And if you've really enjoyed that experience, you could also follow us on social media. We are MFV Podcast on Twitter. I believe if you search Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook or Blue Sky, I think, you can also find us. So check us out there as well. And you could also follow me on various social media. I'm Nick Bryan. That's Bryan, Bryan on most of them. Got a little red background cartoon avatar. Come and follow me there and see me increasingly furiously promoting my upcoming Kickstarter for the Courier Z anthology.
You can find more from me on Instagram, Twitter and Blue Sky by searching for Alistair Ball. You can also find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com or find my theatre reviews at Everything Theatre. Or you can join us here next time when we will be turning on our fellow Americans in Civil War, written and directed by Alex Garland. And then we'll be asking people to stand and deliver in the 18th century with Renegade Nell. Join us in 2 weeks to find out what we thought of those. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.